Hi, I'm Lily. Today, I will be talking a little bit about language, particularly internet slang, and further about a subset of online trans slang, which is by itself a subset of online LGBT slang. I will slowly be adding trans stereotypes with little to no acknowledgements, more and more as this goes on. Starting with general internet slang, I would like to present the two studies I found to be the most interesting. That being eligibility of internet slangs between millennials and Gen Zers, a comparative study published in 2023, and impacts of internet slang on the academic writings of computer science students, also published in 2023. And I will barely gloss over them, as what they show is how fast language adapts and how difficult it is to make a study, especially with internet culture. As these were published last year and somehow manages to be outdated with their chosen vocabulary, words such as lit, fitspiration, and deserve. This is a blank piece of paper, added entirely for dramatic effect. Words that are so far outdated that the only one I recognize is lit. However, if we were to use that stayed with me, such as pog, or goated, or cringe, I will quickly alienate pretty much anyone not familiar with these terms, which, at the end of the day, is pretty poggers. Some might even say based. Using these words outside a written form feels wrong. I am, for the record, completely out of touch with the younger generation slang terms. I don't know what the words gyat, skibbity, or unk means, and the only reason I know RIS is because it was adopted by a Twitter transpience. So to be glossing over the studies, the first study I mentioned concludes that slang is a large part of identity, and that being aware of slang terms and fostering digital literacy in all generations is a net positive. The second study I mentioned, which is specifically about how online slang impacts academic writing, concludes that using social media has a net negative effect on students' vocabulary, something I, as a terminally online brainrot connoisseur, can absolutely agree with. Now, to the part I find most interesting, the subsection of trans slang that I can only describe and name using this meme. And even though I'm just a puppy girl pilled, bottom-coated, EP princess chaos activist, popping feminems as my girl dinner, I can still take a more objective look at what I use online. You can't see it, but I poorly scribbled weed onto a cigarette, as the whole trans stereotype thing. This is the funniest joke I'll tell in my entire life. I have peaked, I can die now. I mentioned BDSM in the first sentence of trans slang. I'm handing this in to my teacher. Listen, I don't like formality. I don't know if it's something wrong with my brain or if it's something related to trauma. I mean, fuck, it could be. But I can't be formal for long periods of time. It makes me actively uncomfortable, and I have no idea why. So to start, let's look at studies. First, a comprehensive list on all studies made on online trans slang. There are no studies. My laptop is only here for dramatic effect. I did just dialogue of them. The closest thing I did find to a study, like on trans language, was a study called Language Features of Transgenders as Their Gender Representation in Digital Culture, which sounds promising, but it simply boils down to Hunter Schafer used swear words in an interview once. And honestly, I find that fucking hilarious. And although not universal, the subsection of transfem communication that I use does come with a lot of words and forms of speaking that are more immature than regular formal speech. For what I can only assume, of my own lived experiences, to be a way to make up for lost time, in a sense. In that I didn't really have the childhood I wanted, so to let out that inner child in some way is emotionally gratifying. On the topic of language, I received death threats on Twitter just for having a trans flag in my username. But somehow these same people are too scared to call me a slur. Like, come on, call me a tranny. Twitter doesn't care enough to ban you. The identity I've found in the language I use online is something I quite enjoy. Not because it's a reflection of who I am or who I want to be, but as that immature part of me that I never got to let out until I was already in my 20s. And I think that for a lot of trans people, especially trans women, there rings some truth to that, though I do not think in any way that it's universal or a universally lived experience within the community, nor the group of trans women in general. Just, I think it's a lot more common than a lot of people let it. I think it's more common than people think, and I think it's simultaneously also less common than what people think. I hope I worded that correctly. I hope that was intelligible in any way. This can of Monster Energy drink is entirely here for the stereotype. It's not open. Like, come on. I don't even like Monster. In conclusion, slang tends to be a reflection of a group, particularly the group that uses the slang terms and the words. And it carries with it a lot of identity and personality, along with the lived experiences of the people in the group. And even though slang can be off putting by those who are not part of that community or subsection of a community, it's still valid, and it is its own way of both personalizing and relating to other people. Slang is a very important part of language, and language is a very important part of identity, just in general. Every single study on language that I could find mentions that. I know I've been using a lot of bits to get my point across, comedy and such, but I think it does actively reflect on who I am and how my language is, especially online. I think it's a somewhat important part of describing it. I mean, I'm sitting here with my IKEA shirt, right? The most trans stereotype of all time. We all have an IKEA shirt, right? I have two. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to bed.